Um, Setting this shit up. Good evening is gray matter. So I was going to talk about the Fourth Amendment violations that have been going on, especially dealing with the Linux community. How they're trying to force us to age verify at a operating system level. Lon Duke Journal's been talking about it. Several other, tech YouTubers have been talking about this shit. The compliance of these developers is just no fucking spine whatsoever, no balls, and in all honesty, they should be excommunicated from Linux altogether. But whatever. Midnight BSD, first open source operating system to ship age verification. We got an ex fucking Microsoft employee, or he was a Microsoft employee. I don't fucking know. But this random dude out of fucking nowhere just added age verification groundwork to System D. Now, this affects me because I use Arch. All right. So I'm going to have to migrate to Arch Linux now just to avoid this fucking bullshit. Then we do have some good news. Anthropic leaked Claude's source code, and we actually have GitHub repositories now for it because as soon as it happened, everybody jumped on it. I thought it was a April Fool's joke at first, but no, it really happened. We got articles. So Anthropic just made Claude open source now. And you can find it by searching Open Claude. Dead serious. There's a video about it right here. But I'm not about to talk about that today. We are literally having a Senate hearing about the mRNA COVID vaccines. This shit is 12 hours deep. I had to scroll all the way back. I didn't even get a chance to really watch all of this because I was at work. But I'm gonna let this shit run. We're going to see who's still trying to keep up the facade and who's still trying to push the agenda of COVID. Because we already know the facts here if you've been paying attention. This was a plan to depopulate the world, and they were doing it through the vaccinations. They weren't doing it through actual COVID. COVID itself is just a cold virus. All right, you can read the 2005 paperwork on SARS-CoV-2 by Dr. Anthony Fauci, and you'll realize that a lot of this shit, it ain't what it seems, and it was planned. The Epstein files will tell you about it being planned. They were talking about planned pandemics. Like, I'm sick and tired of just looking at these people's faces, bro. Because you already know that YouTube, Facebook, etc. have been censoring all of the whistleblowers and the people trying to tell you the truth for the longest, and it's like no repercussions are happening. We're talking about the pedophiles and in the Epstein case now, the victims not getting justice. The victims of this pandemic aren't getting justice. YouTube should be under investigation. Meta should be under investigation. Zuckerberg should not be free right now lobbying for forced age verification, which is just data collection. All right, it's forced data collection. He's lobbying for forced data collection right now to put us all in a database so that they can enforce a social credit score. That's literally where it's headed to. That's the plan. I'm not stupid. Other people aren't stupid. He's roaming free to do this shit. You got Bill Gates roaming free, trying to force more of his vaccine injections and shit. All of them doing this plan to try to force us into this submission hold of you will own nothing and be happy. You will just work as a slave and be controlled like good little puppets while they get to reap the reward and benefit from all of it. They just want total fucking control. They're free to do this shit. And it's like nobody's getting justice. All right. Nobody. Now, 6 years later, they're talking about the COVID vaccines killing people, and we're actually having Senate hearings about the shit. People died, and the information was kept from you that was actually going to help you. And only now are we talking about this shit. I was labeled a conspiracy theorist and got cussed out by people that I thought was close friends. And now we're talking about this shit. I'm gonna let this shit play. I'm gonna go grab my food and I'm gonna be back.
Since March. I understand the concerns that have been expressed.
I'm just going to be honest, what gets under my skin is how many times those of us who've had a different narrative on this, or not a narrative, but I mean, just a different viewpoint on this, we are always accused of ignoring science. I think I've been trying to follow it quite closely. So again, I will ask you, and we can go through your testimony. Every time you've cited something, we will ask you to cite the study that proves what you're saying. Okay? So again, not really a challenge, it's a request. I mean, I would ask that of all of you. Any of you who have cited some study or some opinion, back it up. And we'll include in the hearing record. We'll have this hearing record will stay open for 15 days. So I'm really encouraging people, send me that science. Again, I entered a piece from Raphael Lataster that pretty well debunks the Watson, I think it's Watson et al., the claims the COVID injection saved millions. This is based on mathematical models. It really wasn't scientific study. So again, throw it all in the hopper and let the public decide. But I do have some questions. Dr. Thorpe, speaking of corrupted studies, you mentioned in your opening statement the Shimabukuro study, which, by the way, Tom Shimabukuro, we have sent something like 70 oversight letters, more than that. In many of them, we've told the CDC, FDA, NIH, we demanded they preserve their records. And that should have been widely distributed throughout the agencies. You know, we, in our subpoena, specifically asked for the communications of Tom Shimabukuro. They couldn't find any. I know the current HHS is investigating that individual. We've sent I would call it a referral to the FBI and to Attorney General to determine this. But again, what happened there? Okay, again, when people are supposed to maintain records and they don't, I get suspicious. But again, going to Dr. Thorpe, and I'm going to probably interrupt you because I want everybody to understand what you're talking about in this study, because we're talking about numbers here, but describe that study on, would you call it fetal demise, miscarriage, and how it was originally presented as evidence to push this on the most vulnerable, as you're saying, pregnant women and the unborn. And how did they distort that study to make that point? Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. So the study in question is a New England Journal of Medicine on April 21st, 2021. And in that same day, the digital edition, there were two publications that were extraordinarily concerning. Both of them, interestingly, coming at a time when vaccine hesitancy was increasing. So the Shimabukuro study was a separate study in addition to an op-ed. The op-ed was by the New England Journal of Medicine, editor-in-chief, who was Eric Rubin, and the managing editor, who was Stephen Morrissey, and then director of the CDC, Rochelle Walensky. And they made statements that were false. They made statements that was fear-mongering, insinuating that pregnant women, if they didn't take the vaccine, would put their lives in harm, their preborn lives in harm, and their newborn lives in harm, when they knew absolutely the opposite was true.
How did they know that?
Well, they know that for several reasons, Senator. Number one, the study by Pinnells and colleagues, who is a maternal fetal medicine specialist from University of Texas, Houston, published a very large study documenting that pregnancy in of itself reduced the maternal mortality by as much as 75% during pregnancy compared to non-pregnant women. That study was available. Also, Dr. Shimabukuro, Tom Shimabukuro, and then director of the CDC, this was 7 weeks after the Pfizer 5.3.6 post-marketing data in 10 weeks that showed the COVID-19 vaccine was the deadliest and most injurious vaccine ever released, with 42,086 injuries, including 1,223 dead. They had that information. They still pushed it on pregnant women.
So let me get this straight. I mean, we already knew this, but they knew it was harmful to pregnant women and still pushed it. They had the data and said, fuck it. We just gonna do this anyway. I told you they're trying to kill you. They wanted to kill you. But let's carry on. I'm gonna keep watching. I got my food right here.
So let's get to the number where there's 700 individuals included in this statistic that shouldn't have been included. So describe that. I mean,
over 4,000 in a 10-week period. And then all of a sudden, it's just, how do we arbitrarily go to 10 weeks in this V-safe smartphone collection system? And then what happened to all the other patients? We go down to 827 patients. What happened to the rest?
So you got 827 patients that became pregnant or were pregnant in this. Correct. In terms of, again, it's not really a study, but I mean, they're just analyzing data. So you had 827.
Right.
Okay, so these were women who were pregnant.
Right. 827 that completed a pregnancy in 10 weeks.
Which is not necessarily a born child, but the pregnancy
or
is.
a miscarriage, right.
Okay.
Now, they claimed a 12.6% miscarriage rate.
Which is pretty kind of a normal miscarriage?
No, it's not.
What's a normal miscarriage rate?
3% when you have a normal booking visit.
Okay, it's already an abnormal miscarriage rate in that 827.
That's correct.
Okay.
And
so now describe exactly how they.
Okay, so we have 827 patients, right? And they talk about a 12.6% miscarriage. But a miscarriage of those 827, 700 of those mothers had their vaccine in the 3rd trimester. That's way beyond the window when a woman has a miscarriage. So they artificially took those 700 patients and put them in the 1st trimester. No, the 104 patients that had the miscarriage, that goes to the 127. 104 over 127, you're looking at 82% miscarriage. So the key is the percentage of women that got the vaccine in the 1st trimester had an 82% miscarriage. And by the way, that's the exact same miscarriage rate that was seen in the Pfizer 5.3.6 post-marketing
So
data.
I would argue that proves both points in the title of this hearing: the corruption of science, the corruption of federal health agencies. Governor, listen,
trust the science.
I'm cognizant of the fact that you're kind of outnumbered.
Even though it's corrupt.
So I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that if you want to. You don't have to.
Sure. No, I'm happy to. Look, appreciate the information. The tragedy of a miscarriage is always there. It's not 3%.
What is it? What do you think it is?
Well, in my training as a family physician, the miscarriage rate for women is often in the 20s or 30 percentile. For women across their pregnancies, there are just a lot of miscarriages that occur amongst women. So those are all tragic, and I would obviously defer to ACOG, the American, the American College of OBGYNs, who did, and they should come and testify too, who did strongly recommend the vaccine. I mean, I'm not going to speak as an OBGYN. I'm speaking as an ER physician and as a governor. But I'm sure that would be a vibrant discussion. And again, it's a very good point that we have transparency in studies.
So let me move on to my next point. In one of our events, some of you were there, there's Dr. Moon opened up the insert for the COVID injection. Big piece of paper, fold up, and it's other than it says intentionally left blank, it's blank. Now this was quite a few years, I think this was probably a couple of years into the COVID injection, distribution of it, and all these studies, everything on VAERS, I would think somewhere, when you take a look at the actual studies and the adverse events that were documented within those studies, it's now been released through the Pfizer papers and other means, you would think somewhere they ought to put some information in there. So the point I want to make is I think an awful lot of folks are saying that there was not informed consent. I would argue they violated the inviolable principle of informed consent with this COVID injection. I just think that's indisputable. I'll start with you, Dr. Moore.
Informed consent, they literally hid information. And then on top of that, told you you can't get a job without the vaccine. Excuse me, they threatened people's livelihood. Like, bro, I'm fucking hating this shit, man, for real.
McCulloch, do you want to weigh in on that?
I've presented at the FDA a black box warning on the product immediately. I just checked the package inserts for the currently available products, the ones that Senator Blumenthal wants to pursue. Sounds like governor wants to still pursue these. Our FDA still wants them to be administered. They still don't have the word death in the package insert. As of today, they don't. And so Americans are not fairly informed.
Do you have any doubt in your mind that the COVID injection caused some deaths? I mean, what do you think of the, 38,607 right now listed on VAERS? What do you think the real number is? And do you have any science to back up your opinion?
The best data are autopsies. So in the largest autopsy series published to date, I know because I'm the senior author, of all the deaths we examined, and we re-reviewed them, we had an adjudication committee, we had ways of arbitration, deciding on did the vaccine cause death. The answer is, of these cases that came in for autopsy after vaccination, 73.9% of individuals, it was determined that the vaccine was the cause of death. First author is Holscher and colleagues, who's sitting right behind me.
And again, by FDA's own laws, that should be included on that package insert, correct?
Immediately in 2021, Dr. Carol Tassetta, working with the Daily Cloud, wrote Peter's Marks in the summer of 2023 and said, where's the black box warning? Where is it? No word from Marks.
Dr. Vaughn, you want to weigh in on the informed consent?
Well, the other thing is, I think emergency use authorization, actually by definition, when you fill out the documents for the patient, if they read it, it actually says that they should make sure that they are under no compulsion to get this product. And that is what's so confusing, because even though the product was mandated in the summer, at the end of the summer of 2021, the product on the shelves was still the EUA product. And in that sense, for somebody to be mandated to something that they also have to sign to say that they weren't mandated to do it is kind of hard to do legally.
By the way, that's the subject of a couple of oversight letters in terms of the whole full authorization type of thing. Dr. Thorpe, quickly?
Yes, on informed consent, there was completely the opposite in pregnant women. HHS appears to have captured the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and my research team, including Maggie Thorpe, JD, have proven that with the Freedom of Information Act.
For a few
So
million,
they,
for a few $1 million, correct?
many $1 million, they captured ACOG. In December of 2020, everybody at ACOG and the other organizations, we're not going to push this vaccine in pregnant women. In the span of a pregnancy, 40 weeks, September 27th, 2021, you will push the vaccine, you will push it in pregnant women and follow all the HHS criteria. And if you don't, we will destroy you and your professional career will take your license away and we will decertify you. That went out to 60,000 OBGYN doctors. So
we probably should have expanded the.
Remember when I was talking about doctors being decertified, losing their certification?
Title of this, corruption
Remember?
in science, federal health agencies, you know, what would you call those? Professional organizations?
These are the three organizations that essentially govern obstetrical care, not just in the United States of America, but the whole
By
world.
the way, I wanted to ask you, to what extent are the medical journals funded by various conflicting organizations, pharmaceutical companies? I've heard Chinese interests. I mean, are you aware of that? You were talking about the article written by the editors of the New England Journal of Medicine.
Yes, I'm aware of the study by Wen and colleagues, David Daniel Wen, that was just published October 10th of 2024, documenting that 1.06 billion with a B dollars went to the reviewers of the medical journals, of probably the most influential medical journals, New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, BMJ.
And that's coming out of the pharmaceutical industry.
That's correct.
So Dr. Walscott, as a vaccine injured, do you believe you received informed consent?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, informed consent, and I, as a physician, I believe strongly in informed consent. Informed consent requires true and transparent data. And we can sit here and hear the mantra or the typical narrative of safe, effective, saved millions of lives, but in reality, that's not true. Okay? We can talk about efficacy if we want. Again, certainly the vaccines don't prevent infection, don't prevent transmission. I think I could present to you, I mean, and refer to a lot about safety data, particularly with regards to all the adverse events that I think there's more than ample evidence that the federal regulatory agencies ignored. A lot of these systems, FAERS, V-Safe, I call deliberately deficient by design. So do I think I got informed consent? No. Do I think anyone here in the United States in the last 4 years have gotten informed consent in considering getting a COVID vaccination? Emphatically, no.
So by the way, my theory, and this is a theory, I don't have the proof, it's hard to prove these things, but my guess is the reason they were so concerned about issuing a warning on the Han is, again, they didn't want any vaccine hesitancy on this, right? And also, if they alerted doctors to the fact that if you have a patient with myocarditis, you might want to ask them, did you just get a vaccine recently? And otherwise, the doctor is looking at myocarditis, trying to figure out how to treat it, right? Not trying to figure out the cause, because myocarditis does happen. Dr. McCullough, quickly.
Myocarditis was so common that in the UK and Australia, they actually did issue guidelines to doctors on how to recognize it and when to get MRIs. That's how big a problem vaccine myocarditis is.
Also, one of the points I made is they did not warn, they didn't advise doctors to advise against strenuous physical activity, right? They pulled that off of the one warning that they gave. Talk about how dangerous that is. The mild. Talk about how often myocarditis is mild versus serious.
Before the pandemic, there was myocarditis. Can be caused by Coxsackie virus. The most dangerous type is called giant cell myocarditis. It was very rare. I had seen 2 cases in my career. One was fatal. But it's in our guidelines. anyone who develops myocarditis cannot undergo strenuous physical activity. They have to be taken out of sports. It's mandatory because the surge of adrenaline, when there's inflammation in the heart, triggers a cardiac arrest. So you can imagine how reckless it was for the sports teams to mandate vaccines on athletes, provide no provision of safety, and then have them go out in the field.
So why would these federal health officials, when they're discussing putting that warning, that advisory for physicians as they did their kind of weak need warning on myocarditis, what does that tell you? Why would they pull that out?
It was reckless not to provide prudent guidance on reducing the risk of cardiac arrest when a patient has vaccine myocarditis. Whether it's acute myocarditis that we clinically recognize, by the way, 90% are young men, 90% are hospitalized. Tracy Hogan, others at UCSD show that, multiple studies, but there's a larger group of subclinical myocarditis. These are patients with heart palpitations, blood pressure swings, atypical chest pain. Listen, this is water under the bridge. Fortunately, very few people are taking COVID shots anymore, but these patients still have symptoms. A recent report by Koyosmu in Journal of the American College of Cardiology has shown cardiac arrest in people years after the vaccines, and they have found vaccine microscars in the heart.
And we can keep going down this. I did want to go to Mr. Siri, who does a really good job of describing V-Safe, because you actually had to sue. You shouldn't have had to sue, by the way, right? First of all, the health agencies who set up this V-Safe, voluntary online report on specifically the COVID-19 injection safety surveillance, right?
Yeah, V-Safe.
10 million people signed up voluntarily. You would think the federal health agencies would make that information just available anyway, but at a minimum, when you FOIA'd it, Freedom of Information Act, you think they would have just handed it over to you, right? They didn't do that, did they? You had to sue them. How long did it take you to actually get that V-Safe data? And then why don't you describe what you've got and why they were probably trying to hide it?
Sure, it took over 2 years, and you'd also think with a name like V-Safe, it would have been designed to actually assess safety with regards to the COVID-19 vaccine. So V-Safe is a program that the CDC rolled out in December of 2020, along with the first rollout of the first COVID-19 vaccines. And as you just pointed out, Senator, the point was to ask people to sign up. 10 million Americans signed up, almost all of them in the first 6 months. This was when there were no mandates. These were folks who were enthusiastic about getting the vaccine. These were the folks who who felt it was their civic duty. In fact, that's part of what they checked of why they signed up for V-Safe. And so over the next 2 years, the CDC kept putting out study after study after study, dozens of them, in which it said the COVID vaccine is safe. When you look at those studies, what is it relying upon? One of the primary data sets it's relying upon is the V-Safe data, okay? And so on behalf of our client ICANN, we, as you pointed out, submitted a Freedom of Information Act to the CDC, and we said, hey, this data you're collecting in V-Safe is almost all de-identified, because most of it's checked the box. Please provide it. The American public pays for it. You're public servants. American public should have access to it, should be able to do what scientific inquiry is supposed to do, which is replication.
By the way,
Yes.
quickly, what did they ask and what didn't they ask on the V-Safe?
Yeah,
I mean, talk how grossly
in-
inadequate it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand this hearing's about, did our public health agencies do things that were improper? Did they have scienter? Did they purposefully do things improper? And when you look at how V-Safe was designed, I think you'll see that. So V-Safe had check the box most of what V-Safe collected was via check the box options. Then it had some free text field. There were two categories of check the box options. The first category were symptoms. So you could check the box for various symptoms, right? And the
Like, maybe give us an example.
fever, local, little pain.
The standard minor things, right?
Right. And so those symptoms, the V-Safe system only asked you for the first 7 days after injection. And as Dr. Shimabukuro even said in an email that we obtained via FOIA, those are the expected reactions. It's what they called almost immunogenicity. It shows the vaccine is working. And so the symptoms that they picked were totally useless for assessing the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines. And in fact, when you look at the studies that the CDC published, people were reporting those symptoms at 40, 50, 60% of them. Yeah, they reported, pain in the arm, of course. but they were viewed as normal to have a little chill, have a little fevers. And so that part of vSafe was totally useless for assessing safety. So that wasn't useful. What was left? The only other thing that was checked the box was if you sought medical care, if you missed school or work, or if you were unable to perform normal daily activities, and if you checked that you missed, you needed medical care, it then asked you, were you hospitalized, emergency room, urgent care, or telehealth, okay? So that was the data they were collecting. So presumably, vSafe was gonna assess safety by looking at people who sought medical care after vaccination, because everything else they collected on check the box was, at least on the symptoms, was not useful. Now, before I go on to tell you what the healthcare seeking data showed, I just want to go back to the symptoms that the CDC chose. One of the things that we obtained was a copy of the very first version of the design documents for creating vSafe. And when you go to the last page of that design document, it's in my 66-page submission. Everything I'm saying is in the 66-page position with citations and support. What you will see is they had a table. It was called Adverse Events of Special Interest, Pre-Specified Medical Conditions. And on that list, it had myocarditis, it had pericarditis, it had all of the issues that we now see and people have reported with regards to COVID-19 vaccine. It was in their design document before they launched vSafe, but not a single one of those conditions ended up as a check the box, or at least the symptoms of those conditions. You could have put in at least chest pain if you didn't want to use the word myocarditis or pericarditis, but they didn't do that. To me, that is the best evidence, one of the best pieces of evidence out there that our federal health authorities knowingly, consciously chose to design this system. It was not to determine safety. It was in order to assure their a priori assumption of safety. At the end of the day, CDC is a government agency. In my experience, they don't conduct themselves based on what folks would call science or medicine. They are a policy organization. They set their policy, and then everything that they do has to conform with that policy, and their policy is safe and effective.
So again, voluntary system, 10 million people signed up.
Yes.
They've tracked all this data, inadequate, check the box information.
Not only inadequate, yes.
And what they should have been just making available online, like quite honestly, like VAERS. I mean, VAERS available. You can see it, okay?
They should have.
They should have made that available as well. They didn't. And so you had to sue. When did you sue them?
Sued them. It would have been a few months after the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. And
Okay,
it took us a
so
year
early,
and a half.
early in 2021.
It took us 2 lawsuits, actually, because we, in order to make them take contradictory positions, and only, so we sued them 2 different ways, and only when they had no choice, they finally released the data after
And
a year
you
and a half.
first filed a FOIA request.
Yes,
And they should have just boom, they should have handed it over to you.
if
Right?
they wanted
Because
to be
they obviously
transparent.
were collecting this data, had to be kind of centralized. Wouldn't have been that big a task, I wouldn't think, to, okay, here's what the data shows
It would
us.
have taken them seconds.
They should have, by law, should have just turned it over to you.
They should have.
And they didn't. So you had to go to court, and it took you 2 years.
It took it.
Okay, then, so now drum roll.
Yes.
What did the vSafe data show once you finally extracted it by a lawsuit using the courts?
Yes.
What did they show you about how safe the
Here's what
injection was?
Here's what it showed. In contrast to the dozens of studies that the CDC relied upon to say that COVID-19 vaccines were safe using vSafe data, where they only reported the first week of what people reported after the injection seek medical care, even though they know that injuries from COVID vaccine can happen well after the first week, but they only reported the first week to make the number look low. And even though they designed the system,
Wait a minute. So they didn't even use long-term studies. Bro, this... All right. It's the
to
shit I'm talking about.
collect medical seeking behavior for 6 weeks after getting the vaccine and 3 more instances after that. Now, and so if you're asking,
And by the way, and a quarter missed a day of work, or, which by the way, Thomas Bakura in a video before the emergency use authorization about the safety surveillance system said, we're going to take this so seriously. If somebody loses a day of work, we're going to have a CDC official on the phone following up, checking it out. Was that your experience, Dr. Walskog?
Absolutely not.
Not exactly. Did you want to say anything else about that? I know I've been kind of stomping on you.
no, not at all. No, it's just this. When they designed vSafe, the only data that probably could have assessed safety was medical seeking behavior. So you would hope our federal health agencies had a number. Look at how, how often COVID itself injured people. So you want to make sure the vaccine's safer than that, right? So was it 1 in 200 sought medical care? Would they pulled the plug? 1 in 100 people reported seeking medical care V-Safe, then they'd pull the plug? The data showed 1 in 13 people sought medical care on average 2-3 times each. I don't think there was a number, unfortunately, that would have been sufficient for CDC to pull the plug.
So what we sought for years is their analysis of errors. The proportional reporting ratio, which they did release some of those through FOIA to news organizations, that type of thing, not particularly useful. And by the way, they didn't particularly like that statistic anyway, so they did empirical Bayesian analysis. Never got it. Over a year, never got it.
Well, we have
Why?
2 federal lawsuits still going on right now for
Why?
the EB data.
Okay, now we're starting to get some of it. Okay, and again, I don't want to steal thunder or jump the shark on things that I know about that are being studied, but I think it'll be shocking to people to realize that they definitely had signals in empirical Bayesian that they were not reporting. And it will show, it's kind of complex, but this will be shown.
Well,
Okay, so that's what I say, they say, well, you're not proving the case on this myocarditis. No, this is the tip of the iceberg, of the cover-up, of the downplaying, and you have to ask why. Governor, just this story, were you aware of the story of V-Safe?
Through the testimony, I should probably be allowed to comment. There's been a lot of comments, and we talk about commenting and so on, because I'm pretty outnumbered here. Look, the couple things. First of all, VAERS, all right, which has been mentioned a bunch of times. It's not an adjudicated reporting system. It's valuable to get input, which we're grateful for, but it is a flood of experience, and there is no, there's no clear causal connection. No, I see your numbers, but that doesn't.
Did that cause you concern?
No, it didn't. I'll tell you why. Because we do want input, massive input. I'm grateful that there were people putting that in there. But that's why we do science and studies. We don't just do what this is.
I'm going to argue with you here, okay?
Fine.
So here's the problem, because I was going to go down this road. They didn't see safety signals because they didn't want to see them. They had them. They wouldn't report on them. They lied to us. That's what I'm trying to get at. They lied to us, just like they lied and said, this thing's going to stay in your arm, when they knew it wouldn't, and we know conclusively it does not. They talked about the mRNA. This can just, it's going to go in there, stay in the arm, it's going to dissolve, in hours, couple days, whatever. But they knew it wasn't mRNA, it was modified RNA, and it stayed in the body, together with the spike protein. And we have studies of that. They're not talking about that as they continue to push this. So again, they've lied to us. So again, you can keep saying that, follow the science. No, the science has been corrupted and the agencies have been corrupted. So we have not been able to believe in them. That's why they have no credibility.
I'm entitled
Go
to
ahead,
answer
Governor.
many of these things. So we certainly disagree on a lot of things, okay?
Yes.
One of them is that you say corrupted and corruption, and that is possible, okay? But I didn't have that. I'm just sharing with you as a doctor and a governor and a public health officer and who had a great response for our state. We didn't have that experience. We did have a great...
By the way, I have checked other island nations and stuff.
Go ahead, check them.
Be interesting.
We were advising them. They were calling me for advice, and that's why we did safe travels, like the senator bristled at. We did actually find ways to help people know whether or not they had COVID, whether or not they'd spread it, whether or not people were at risk. We did that work, okay? Other people may have been, not doing that work. I don't know if anybody in this room did that work. I did the work, okay? I was out there saving lives either in the ER or as a lieutenant governor. Everyone else is talking about corruption, okay? I was doing the work.
We had doctors that had the courage to treat COVID patients as well. So.
Yeah, and I was a COVID patient also and in isolation for 14 days. And it was the right thing to do at the time, September 11th of the first year, because we didn't know if I would spread it to my children or to my wife or to other people that I cared deeply about or my constituents. So I honored it, unlike others might not have, okay, being in quarantine. So that's a different topic. Now, we've talked about myocarditis a lot, okay? And we are going to differ in our opinions about the data, I'm sure. However, there were about 12 cases from one perspective per million second shots. That's one of the studies and reports. I'm sure other gentlemen at this table are going to dispute that and have disputed that completely. But I will tell you that we saw one heck of a lot more terrible cardiac issues, myocarditis, far more clots for people that ended up in the ICU that we had to treat. We saw cataclysmic numbers when people got bad COVID and ended up at the hospital, but they didn't get bad COVID when they got vaccinated.
Man, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Ooh, man, woo. And this the shit I'm talking about. The fucking liars. The fucking wolves in sheep's clothing talking mad shit. Straight bullshit. Especially when dudes was getting claimed, when people were claiming that, you know, patients were dying from COVID, only to find out later that it had nothing to do with COVID. Patients that were already on hospice, dying from something completely different, and they used that to add to the COVID data. I don't want to hear none of this shit.
That is the point. Now, we're walking
Fuck out of
past-
here.
So again,
We're walking past a lot of those issues.
Okay, can you cite the study that proves that?
Yes, and I'm
Okay,
happy.
well, so
Should have been more transparency. Maybe people will find ultimately, maybe, that vaccines cause more harm than people were able to report at the time. However, it's my firm belief as a provider of healthcare and a person who had to make a state plan that there is value in providing vaccinations like this. And next time we have a pandemic, it's going to be even more serious if it ever affects children. I will tell you, people are going to clamor for vaccinations if children are terribly affected. And the country, you think it was shut down before, it's going to be shut down 50 times worse. We worked to open the state. That was a misrepresentation by the good senator from Ohio. We worked to open the schools and open the state by just making sure people had a test so that they were negative. It helped us. It helped us. And we didn't force people to get vaccinated if they wanted to travel. And I didn't support mandates, just so you know the truth.
But we had mandates, and those PCR tests were bullshit too. You could modify a PCR test to get anything.
fine.
Right. So a lot of this, of course, is tilted very heavily to demonize this vaccination and the process. And I respect if the data comes out and shows that, or someone covered up, I respect that.
So I will say the COVID cartel was tilted very strongly to demonize these people, okay? To vilify them, to offer retribution. So no.
But you just called them a cartel. You don't think that's demonizing somebody?
There's no doubt this panel is definitely tilted toward one side, but the vast majority of the media and the agencies and everything else are tilted toward the one side, and that's what's so frustrating. The reason we'll have a tough time the next pandemic is because our federal health officials and the media lied to us, and we have proof they lied to us, and we have proof that they went and they used the power of the federal government to have social media companies censor people. Dr. Walskog, I do want to.
Oh, that part. Are they going to be held accountable?
Cover this because this is egregious. And people committed suicide, cut them down, and people lost contact, and people committed suicide because of it.
Yeah, so this is now earlier in 2021 when there was just a couple of isolated people across the country early on. For example, Breanne Dressen, who's my co-chair at React 19, she was injured during the AstraZeneca trial, so very much in the fall of 2020. And early on after that episode, she started communicating with some other people across the country. And, her husband has some connections out at the NIH. That group started communicating with Dr. Nath, who is a neurologist at the NIH, who clearly confirmed that these injuries were vaccine related. These people started, giving each other support, really. What do we do? What do we do? Communicated with Senator Johnson's office. And in the end, they had a press conference in June of 2021 in Milwaukee. And the idea of the press conference, again, don't let me speak for you, Senator, but was just to allow these people to be acknowledged and to communicate their story. Well, Not only did the media show up and not cover their story, it turned into a hit piece basically on Senator Johnson. But more importantly, within 3 to 5 days after that press conference, all of those support groups that Brianne Dressen had set up were all shut down. And in retrospect, they found out that, through the White House Communication Office, who was communicating with another contractor who was following her, and they directly through the White House Communication Office shut all those groups down. And you might say, well, it's too bad they can't communicate with each other. No, some of the people were suicidal and subsequently killed themselves. So this resulted in.
And Governor, again, I've heard you say, and we should never do that, and it's regrettable and all that kind of stuff, but that's what happened. It happened repeatedly. It's still happening.
Look, let me support Dr. Walsog, okay, for a moment. Okay, first, I will be empathetic. It is terrible. And believe me, this is not anything that I would do. But let me just say this.
Tell you, Peter Marks didn't find it terrible because he's behind it.
Okay. Well, but I do want to say that is terrible, and we should have open communication. However, that is not necessarily what I'm feeling. The love here in the hearing, okay? And mind you, I spent 14 years on your side of the desk, and I spent now 6 years on the other side as an executive. The truth is, it's always somewhere in the middle. People have their biases, and if it's true that the Biden administration, encouraged people to not share information, that's bad. But there was another president also that was encouraging the vaccinations. And so we had two presidents, one Republican, one Democrat, in fairness, who they promoted the vaccine. And so all this conversation about not sharing enough of the potential risks and so on, everyone, and I would say this, everyone, including you guys and us.
Here's the difference. When Trump had the vaccine, he promoted hydroxychloroquine, and everybody tried to shut him down with that. Like all the other remedies that he was bringing up, everyone tried to shut him down with that. They made it completely political. They essentially boxed him into using the vaccine, and he still said that there will be no mandates. It's a choice to get it. Biden made fucking mandates. That's the difference. I was pissed off when Trump even brought up using the vaccine, but it was never forced. Which is why I don't want to say made it my own goal, but I wanted to warn everybody about the shit. I was trying my hardest to tell people about these vaccines. And I got ostracized and ridiculed for it. Then Trump gets the election stolen from him. And before I know it, they talking about you can't have a job without getting vaccinated. So I also was unemployed for a while too. They need to stop leaving out details. Hate this shit, man.
And these good people, we're all responsible as a society to do our best to communicate. And when I hear words, just forgive me, when I hear
prove that the injection actually reduced severity of symptoms, prevented deaths, give us those studies so we can throw those in the hearing record and compare them to other studies like, for example, the Lassiter study or Lataster study that I did enter.
it will not be difficult, Senator. There's so many.
And again, listen, as I said, I'm well aware of the fact 5. I think I've given you a fair amount of time to respond and stuff, and I've tried to be respectful.
I'm used to talking a lot. It's okay.
We all are. It's an occupational hazard here, and we'll just prove it here, Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. And I'll have to be quick because I have to actually go to the floor. I've just been at my other committee meeting. And I want to ask you a kind of yes or no question, Governor Green. HHS apparently is making plans to change the way that vaccines are approved, requiring placebo trials for vaccines that have been used previously for decades. In other words, the clinical trials on vaccines already in use will involve placebo trials. I understand a lot of doctors feel that this practice would be unethical. Do you agree?
Yes, that will be unethical.
Thank you.
And it will be unethical because we already have demonstration that people get protection. So it's unethical to give them a placebo and watch kids die of meningitis or diphtheria or polio. That's why it's unethical. Thank you.
It's not unethical to study. It's not unethical to research. It's not unethical to run trials, but to possibly put people at risk when
For the record, polio, there's a lot of shit about polio that got hidden too. It's talking about kids dying of polio. A lot of those people were vaccinated. That's another thing I found out. They lied to you about polio.
a particular vaccine has already been proven safe and effective and has been in use for decades, that would be unethical. And that the wellness company has made money from the sale of supplements and other, quote, spike detox products. Is that correct?
I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of the Wellness Company, which is a national company started in 2022. It delivers healthcare, so it's a company of doctors. Also provides nutraceuticals and supplements, fully prescribes drugs across the range, health education materials.
How much money has your company made from the sale of spike detox products?
And the company has innovative products like spike detoxification based on peer-reviewed studies demonstrating the scientific underpinnings for a combined use of three over-the-counter nutraceuticals, which are nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. You can buy them anywhere on the internet if you want them. So the company, I don't have the company's balance sheet with me, but I can tell you its overall valuation right now is about $50 million with an M. And that pales in comparison to the tens of billions of dollars that the government spent on vaccines that have caused great harm. At the Wellness Company, we are trying to help the country recover, whereas further vaccination is putting the country into a big hole in terms of damaging their health care.
And your
Audience, please.
your company, that company also makes ivermectin? Ivermectin?
The company can prescribe, the doctors can prescribe ivermectin, they can prescribe Paxlovid, molnupiravir, they can prescribe any drug within the pharmacopoeia.
How much
But ivermectin was talked about a lot, and they tried to discredit that as well.
have been the profits from?
Yeah, I receive a set salary. I don't receive any percent share of profits, and I have a very minor equity stake in the company. I work there part-time. I'm full-time in practice. I'm also the president of the McCullough Foundation.
But you do share in the revenue and profits.
I receive a set salary.
Let me ask you,
So that's
again,
an incorrect assertion. I get a set salary. I do not have any sharing of any revenue that comes in,
Okay, thank you.
okay?
Has your board certification ever been revoked?
I resigned from the American Board of Internal Medicine November 11th of 2024 due to an ongoing dispute over the term you've used, misinformation, which is a propaganda term. It's a
your board's-
leverage term. So I had a dispute. I resigned from them. Listen, I'm one of the most published people in the American Board of Internal Medicine. They rely on my research for a lot of their board materials.
So
And then-
you're no longer board certified?
I'm board certified by the National Association of Physicians and Surgeons. There's many different organizations that provide board certification.
Which one did you resign from?
The American Board of Internal Medicine, after 40 years of a perfect clinical track record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A perfect example of the vilification of people that had a second opinion. By the way, it's always my understanding in medicine that if you had a serious health condition, you go seek a second opinion, because nobody has all the answers. Every human body is different, but that was an unfortunate line of questioning.
I'm glad he
Siri.
said that shit. All the people come to me, trust the experts, trust the experts. Fucking dumbasses. There were doctors that did not agree with the doctors that you were supporting. And they had the evidence to fucking back it up. But whenever I presented that shit, I got banned and blocked. I would share this shit to the Arizona Discord, but nah, the Arizona Melee Discord, they don't like different opinions. They don't like anything that goes against their fucking worldview. I already got dogpiled by them enough. I'm done. I'm gonna keep letting this play though.
Do you want to describe why it's appropriate for HHS Secretary Kennedy?
Is citing to the FDA underlying clinical trial documents that confirm. So if you dispute this term, you got to argue with the FDA. Not a single routine childhood vaccine on the current schedule, other than the Covaxin licensed for 12 and older, was licensed based on a clinical trial in which the control group received a placebo. And if the control group received another vaccine, that vaccine was also not licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial. That is all set forth in here. It is categorically accurate, a placebo meaning an inert
By the way,
substance.
do you want to just talk about some of the most egregious examples? One I found, and this is off of a blog, or I mean off of a podcast, so, but I'm assuming it's true because it hasn't been disputed. Apparently, the approval for the aluminum adjuvant in vaccines was done off of a trial with 4 rabbits.
Aluminum adjuvant
One of the rabbits died. They killed the other ones after 28 days and found all kinds of aluminum in the body, but they approved it anyway. So good go. Is that true as well?
Aluminum adjuvants are not, they're used to induce autoimmunity in lab animals. They are part of the active ingredients. They're not separately approved as their own standalone product. Injecting a child with just aluminum adjuvant would be entirely unethical because it has no therapeutic value in and of itself, unless you want to treat them like a lab animal.
I'm
to
not
induce
suggesting do
autoimmunity.
that. I'm just saying, but that's what it was approved for use in vaccines is.
As far as I'm aware, actually, it's never been approved, aluminum adjuvant standing alone.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not aware of any such approval. But to answer your question, why look at the safety of of childhood vaccines? And the answer, I think, is this: we should be looking at all environmental insults, because we are in the midst right now of a pandemic. There's been a lot of talk. We got to be ready for the next pandemic. We have a pandemic right now. It's a pandemic of chronic disease amongst our children. Over 50% of kids in America have a chronic disease right now. That's up from under 13% in the early 80s. What's changed? What has caused massive immune dysregulation to occur amongst our children? Why do I say that? Because most of the chronic diseases that we've seen exploding, asthma, you go down the list, have an etiology in being a form of immune dysregulation. Not our, and I've set that forth in my submission as well. So you have an explosion in chronic disease since the early 80s. Most of those chronic diseases are a form of immune dysregulation. What has changed in terms of might be causing the immune systems of our children in mass to go haywire? Well, maybe we should start by ruling out the fact that we have gone from 3 injections on the CDC schedule in 1986, the year the National Child Vaccine Draft was passed, to currently, if a child gets the full CDC schedule, follows it today, by 1 year of age, gets 29 injections, including in utero, okay?
Yeah.
3 to 29. And every one of those vaccines, as I mentioned earlier, was clinical trialed and licensed by a company knowing they would not be liable for design defect claims. We need to study that,
So
like
maybe you ought to
everything else.
study that. Okay, I think we've probably gone about as far as we're going to go today. What I am going to do
It
is
all
give
needs to
each
be
one of you,
investigated.
and we'll end with the governor. You can have the last word. Well, I'll probably have the last word. But give you each, and I really respect it, not much more than a minute. If there's just something non-itchy point you want to make, can you make it in a minute? And we'll start with you, Dr. McCullough.
You've asked for us to cite evidence. 3 papers by Nathaniel Mead, who's in the audience today, a former National Institutes of Health writer, 3 of them that contain nearly 1,000 references, so they're all there in these papers, have concluded that the risks of COVID-19 vaccination far outweigh any theoretical benefits. We've heard countless wishful thoughts from Senator Blumenthal and from Governor Green, Dr. Green. But they're wishful. They wish the vaccines would have saved lives. They wish the vaccines would have reduced severity. I can tell you, because you know this, I was one of the few doctors who was on the real front lines of treating acutely sick patients at home. That's how we reduced risk of death, not via a vaccine. The marathon runner, he passed away because he didn't receive effective early multi-drug treatment. It didn't matter whether he took a vaccine or not. Our CDC knew about thousands of patients fully vaccinated early in 2021 dying of acute COVID-19. It was abundantly obvious the COVID-19 vaccines did not reduce the risk of death. I don't want America to be fooled by this hearing today, thinking that the vaccines save lives, because they didn't.
Dr. Vaughn, please, audience, please. Dr. Vaughn.
So I challenge physicians to really return to the 2 C's of medicine, which is care about the person, the actual human being in front of you, and actually be curious about why they're there and why they seek help, not tell them that it's all in their head and there's nothing you can do. And nothing I have read has said that your problems are problems that I can do anything about. Instead, especially when we look at vaccine injury and long COVID, we're talking about 10 to 15 million people that are suffering, and we have a medical community that doesn't know how to help them. We have to study it, and we have to get back to caring about our patients and being curious about what their ailments are.
By the way, real quick question, because I meant to ask this. You hear long COVID, you hear vaccine injury. Kind of my assumption is most doctors look at a vaccine injury, call it long COVID. What do you think the breakdown is? Because long COVID exists, right? I mean, that spike protein's a nasty thing.
And so just again, I think one of the biggest things is, at least in the 4,000 patients I've seen, about 80% of them have been vaccinated, 20% have not. And so long COVID does not equally mean that you have had to be vaccinated. There's plenty of people that didn't get vaccinated.
Yeah, but the problem is, if that 20% was around the 80% that were vaccinated, the spike protein could shed. That's the problem. Spike protein shedding is a thing. Look, this thing is 12 hours long. I'm gonna cut this video short. I'm gonna put the entire hearing in my description box, and you can watch this for yourself. I'll leave it at that. Peace.